Hello everyone, and welcome to the Tome of Silver, the show where I randomly select a game from my collection, review it, and add it to an ever-growing ranking list. The story behind the creation of Black Rock Shooter is one that I find to be incredibly fascinating. In December of 2007, Japanese illustrator Ryohei Fuke, better known online as Fuke, posted an image on the website Pixiv. The image featured a character Fuke had designed himself, titled Black Rock Shooter. The character possessed ghost white skin, contrasted by their stylish black clothing and hair. Perhaps the most striking and recognizable quality was their blue eyes, one alight in a blue flame, a characteristic which has unfortunately been rendered a bit more comical in recent years. This single piece of art was all there was to the character. They had no story or world attached to them, nor any notable personality. That air of mystery seemed to only draw in more viewers. Many were inspired by the artwork, and fascinated with what Black Rock Shooter could be. Ryo, the songwriter of the Japanese rock band Supercell, was one such person to be taken with the art. So taken, in fact, they wrote a song called Black Rock Shooter. They used the same Vocaloid synthesizer as Hatsune Miku. Fuke himself even collaborated with Supercell to make more illustrations to accompany the song. Just like that, Black Rock Shooter was thrust into the spotlight, eventually erupting into a multimedia franchise. Over the years, Black Rock Shooter would eventually have an OVA, several anime series, manga, and a video game released on the PSP. This game, simply titled Black Rock Shooter: The Game, was released in Japan on August 25, 2011. The game was eventually localized in 2013, having English text but maintaining the Japanese audio. However, the localized version was only on the PlayStation Digital Store. The digital store is sadly no longer accessible, making English copies of the game no longer available without using an emulator. Since I prefer having a physical copy of the game when I can, my first experience was with the Japanese version. Thankfully, the game was shockingly easy to navigate, despite not speaking the language, and I was able to beat the game with little issue. Of course, this meant I had no clue what was going on in the story, so playing through the English version for this video would be the first time I got to properly experience it. Was I missing out on anything? Grab your oversized gun, let the fire in your eye erupt, and let's turn the page to Black Rock Shooter: The Game for the PSP. In the year 2032, planet Earth has been invaded by aliens that have begun a worldwide extinction. By the year 2051, it's become clear that humanity is all but lost, with only 12 humans left alive on the whole planet. Not willing to accept the annihilation of the race quietly, these 12 continue to fight, and activate a weapon as their final bastion of hope. This weapon is the young girl, Black Rock Shooter, who, for the sake of my sanity, I will refer to as Rock for the remainder of this review. Rock herself has no memories of who she is, or how she was created. When she first awakens, she barely even has a personality, speaking short, flat sentences, and struggling to understand basic human concepts. Despite her confusion, she resolves to help fight back against the aliens and their nefarious, color-coded leaders. In the process, she begins to learn and grow from her human comrades, and attempts to learn more about who she really is. The plot of Black Rock Shooter is not very engaging. It certainly tries to tell something compelling with plenty of emotional beats, but it falls flat and isn't all that captivating. The human survivors are rather boring, and I felt like the game expected me to care for them far more than I actually did. The problem is you barely get any meaningful time with them. They're never allowed to develop beyond the one-note personalities they're introduced with. It doesn't help that a lot of the dialogue in this game is poorly written, so the few moments we do get with these characters hardly contributes to their likability. The only one I kind of enjoyed was Rothkal, as he's easily the one human we spend the most amount of time with. He's the one primarily speaking with and guiding us through each level, giving him more dialogue than all of his teammates combined. The moments of him teaching Rock about the various aspects of humanity were endearing, and I felt a genuine bond between the two. Rock herself was also compelling. Sure, the robotic character learning to feel and gain emotion is something we've seen time and again, but it still works, and it's enjoyable watching her grow throughout the story. Everything else though was rather boring. I couldn't care less about the villains, despite their fun designs, and when the plot shifts more towards Rock's missing memories, things start to become a bit more confusing and difficult to follow. At least the cutscenes are fun to watch, especially when Rock faces off against the A-class aliens. The game shines when it leans into its over-the-top action, and the encounters against the aliens deliver. The game doesn't look too bad either. It animates well, and the character models look good from afar. However, the game likes zooming in on characters' faces for a cinematic feel. When they do, it makes the pixels on their faces and the backgrounds far more apparent, and in a way that makes them look rather ugly. When the camera is at a reasonable distance, everything looks fine. I've seen the PSP do a lot better, but I've seen it do a lot worse too. BRS is an action RPG, where you play as Rock to blast through the alien invaders. The game consists of 6 stages, broken up into individual missions. These missions typically involve Rock needing to traverse from point A to point B while tearing through whatever enemies are in her way. The combat mechanics here are something I haven't seen in an RPG. When entering battle, you control where Rock is aiming, and she can fire several shots at once. There's a rigid lock-on system that only activates when your reticle gets close to an enemy. However, there will be times when an enemy disables the lock-on, so you'll want to make sure you get efficient at moving your reticle quickly from alien to alien. Naturally, the extraterrestrial threat isn't just going to stand there and take it. They'll either fire projectiles of their own, or will progress forward to hit you directly. To defend yourself, you can either block or evade. Blocking is quick and reduces incoming damage. Meanwhile, evading lets you avoid taking damage entirely, but using your evade or firing your cannon raises your system meter. The higher this meter gets, the fewer shots Rock will be able to fire at once. If this meter reaches 100%, Rock will overheat, preventing you from performing any action for a short time. As such, combat becomes a game of meter management, dishing out damage and evading attacks while trying to keep your meter as low as possible. Alongside gaining experience as you would in any other RPG, defeating enemies and progressing through missions will complete challenges. These challenges are the secondary way of powering up Rock. Challenge rewards can provide them stat boosts like more health or attack, or provide skills to use in battle. Rock can have up to 4 skills equipped at a time. Skills provide buffs in battle or perform powerful attacks, but they'll need to recharge after each use. Having the right combination of skills is key to dealing with foes as efficiently as possible. Overall, the combat system is rather unique and decently fun, especially when you learn a new skill to play around with. Unfortunately, the combat is pretty much the only thing to do in this game. The stages you move around in have no puzzles or platforming. They're just empty, narrow corridors meant to lead you from one combat encounter to the next, with no variety in between. And for how much Blackrock Shooter relies on combat, the enemy variety on display here is rather poor. You'll fight the same enemies ad nauseum, which makes it easy to learn how to best deal with them each time, and dispatch them in a matter of seconds. After a while, defeating groups of enemies becomes routine, because you fought the exact same foe 20 times prior. This removes all intrigue from battles until the rare moment the game eventually decides to grace you with maybe 1 or 2 new enemy types. The final quarter of the game was especially painful. By that point, I had 4 skills which worked reliably enough that I never needed to change them. As soon as the battle started, I would use Aggressor, which boosted my attack and defense. I would immediately follow up with Warhammer, which attacked all enemies on screen. This attack alone would often completely destroy all enemies on the field. If it didn't, it only took a second or 2 to remove those remaining with my basic shot. In the event I was fighting an enemy with an above average HP pool, then I would then use my tracer gun to remove another healthy chunk of HP, and it wouldn't take long to get rid of what's left. All the while I would still have my defense boost, and my final skill, Regenerator, which slowly restored my health, meaning I rarely felt in danger during battle. This method was so effective that each fight would be completed simply by pressing the same 3 to maybe 5 buttons, making the entire game trivially easy. And when the combat makes up about 90% of your overall game, that is a very bad sign. The only place where I found the combat consistently fun was the boss fights against the A-class aliens. These boss fights are where Blackrock Shooter begins to shine, and brightly at that. Each boss has a gimmick unique to them, and is far faster and more aggressive than normal enemies. These encounters were fast-paced and an excellent test of my ability to manage the system meter while keeping up with the boss's onslaught. These were hands down the best part of the whole game, and something I have virtually nothing bad to say about. They were fun and made full use of the battle mechanics. It's just a pity these bosses are few and far between, all while the common enemies fail to keep up the same energy. Very rarely, the game will give you a motorcycle mission as a change of pace. These missions require Rock to avoid oncoming enemies to reach the goal within the time limit. getting hit will slow Rock down, so keeping your vehicle up to speed is the name of the game. If you avoid an enemy at the last second, Rock will strike and destroy them. If you manage to do this 5 times, you can activate your cycle's guns. These guns will eliminate any enemy in front of you, giving you a brief reprieve from dodging. This adds a good risk-reward system. You can play it safe and move out of the way as soon as possible, or leave it to the last second and risk taking damage in exchange for the guns. These sections were good, and if the game had more of these evenly spread throughout the missions, it would have done a lot to stave off the monotony. Instead, these segments get front-loaded in Stage 2, and then disappear, which is such a shame. By Stage 3, a little less than halfway through the game, I was bored to tears. This was shocking because Black Rock Shooter is really short for an RPG, clocking in only around 10 hours or so to finish the main story. There is a post-game that adds roughly another 10 hours or so of additional playtime and can earn the player extra costumes for Rock to wear. But with how boring I found everything to be the first time around, I had no desire to go any further after the credits had rolled. The last thing to mention is the game's music, which was fine, albeit a bit disappointing. First, a minor gripe is that for some reason, the victory music that plays after beating an enemy is outrageously louder than everything else in the game. Second, despite Black Rock Shooter's music-based origins, I found all the tracks kind of forgettable. They get the job done, but I would struggle to remember any of the music the second they stopped playing. The only piece that stood out was One OK Rock's awesome song No Scared, which plays over the game's equally as exciting animated intro. Sadly, none of the actual music during gameplay captures anywhere near the levels of hype this opening does. It was a bummer getting as negative about Black Rock Shooter as I did, because there was never really an aspect of the game I found outright bad. Yeah, the story didn't click, but it has a combat system that manages to be both unique and fun for a time, highlighted by some especially great boss fights. But the game barely has any meat on its bones for an RPG. Its combat becomes far too repetitive far too quickly, and when that's practically the only thing the game has going for it, it makes it very difficult to recommend. Maybe it would be more enjoyable to pop in now and again to do a mission or two, but what's here hardly remains captivating after its opening hours. Black Rock Shooter the game will miss its mark, managing to only hit the number 44 spot near the bottom of the ranking. I wanted to put BRS past Bionicle, as BRS was at least a complete game with a unique combat system. But when I look back, the only parts I truly loved were the boss fights, which made up too little of the game to push it any higher. I wanted you to be better, Black Rock Shooter, I really did. This is as far as you go. And that's all for this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving it a like. It goes a long way to help out the channel. What do you think of Black Rock Shooter the game? Did you enjoy your time with it? And for those who are fans of Black Rock Shooter in general, is there anything in the franchise worth checking out? Please let me know in the comments. I love getting to hear from everyone. Next time, we have more action-focused adventures against otherworldly threats. But let's say we balance out those combat scenarios with a little bit of love, In the meanwhile, thank you all so much for watching. Take care. May we see each other again when we turn to the next chapter in the Tome of Silver.